Okay, welcome back. In the previous video, we learned how we could drop our weapon, and we tied this to the E key so that we would throw the weapon down whenever we wanted to detach the weapon from our character, and now it will be in the pickup state so we can pick it up again. Now, in this video, we're going to work on being able to swap a weapon so that we can walk up to a weapon and we'll already have our weapon equipped. And as soon as we swap the weapons, then the weapon that we're looking at on the ground will become the equipped weapon, and the equipped weapon in our hands already will be thrown to the ground. So we'll basically swap the weapons. Okay, let's get started. So if we take a look at our trace for items function, if we're tracing for items and we hit something, we cast that hit result to an A item and we store it in a local variable of type A item. But what I'd like to do instead of making a local variable is creating a member variable that belongs to shooterCharacter.h. That way we'll have access to the item that we're currently tracing at any given point in time. And then we can access that in other functions in shooterCharacter. So let's go to shooterCharacter.h and scroll all the way down to the bottom of the private variables, and we'll add a new private variable. This variable can be of type AItem. It'll be a pointer, of course, and we're going to call this traceHitItem. Now I'm going to give this a uProperty, and this will be visible anywhere, and we'll make it blueprint read only. So we don't want to be able to set this in blueprints. This will only be populated in code depending on our line trace. Now we can put this in category combat, that's fine. And we of course need our meta specifiers. So we're going to give those to our uProperty as well. Now for the comment, I'm going to say the item currently hit by our trace in trace for items. And in parentheses, we'll say could be null. So if we're not hitting something and casting it successfully to an A item, then this will be null. So that's something that we have to keep in mind when we're trying to access it. Okay, so we want to be able to swap weapons. So let's go up to our protected section and let's make a new protected function called swap weapon. Void swap weapon. Now this is going to take an A weapon. We'll call this weapon to swap. Now for our comment, let's just say drops currently equipped weapon and equips trace hit item. And that's of course if it's not null. So let's give this a function body. And here in swap weapon, what we're going to do is we're going to call drop weapon. That way, whatever weapon we have equipped will be dropped. And then we can simply call equip with our new weapon to swap. So equip weapon, weapon to swap. So that's basically all we need to do for swap weapon. Drop the current weapon and equip the one that we pass into swap weapon. So if we scroll up a little bit to select button pressed, now all we need to do, instead of dropping the weapon, we can simply call swap weapon. But we need to pass in a weapon to swap weapon. So what we can do is we can check to see if trace hit item is not null. And if it's not null, then we can simply pass it in to swap weapon, but we're going to have to cast it because trace hit item is an A item and swap weapon takes a weapon, so we need to cast this to a weapon. So we can say auto trace hit weapon equals cast to a weapon trace hit item. As we start to use more modern C++, we can start to use these features to make our lives more easy. Now we can simply take this call to swap weapon and place it here in the if check and use trace hit weapon. Now this cast may fail, and if it does, when we call swap weapon, let's go to that definition. We're going to call drop weapon, and then we call equip weapon. And if we go to equip weapon, we'll see that we check weapon to equip here. So it could be null, and if it does, then equip weapon does nothing. So we check to make sure it's valid here. Okay, now the last thing we need to do is come back in here and trace for items. And right here, where we create our local variable called hit item, instead of creating a local variable, we can just use our trace hit item member variable we just created and set this equal to that. So let's say trace hit item here. We'll set that equal to this trace hit result actor. And now, instead of using hit item for the rest of our function, we need to use trace hit item. So right here in the if check, we're checking trace hit item and trace hit item get pickup widget. Then we're showing the widget by setting visibility, so that's going to be trace hit item as well. Finally, we're going to check to see if trace hit item is equal to the trace hit item last frame, so we need to replace that there as well, and then we set trace hit item last frame equal to trace hit item. So now trace for items is setting trace hit item whenever we're tracing and actually hitting and casting to an A item. So now we can compile this. Okay, we're back in the editor. I'm going to hit play and come up to a weapon and hit the E key. And now it looks like we have swapped weapons. Now it's kind of hard to tell because all these weapons look exactly the same. So what we can do is we can take one of these weapons here in the world and we can change what it looks like. Now luckily there are different materials for different guns that have come with the Paragon Lieutenant Bellica asset pack. So this one here, let's select one of these, and here in the materials we're going to look at the element 4, that's the material that applies to the guns, and we can take a look at one of the other Bellica guns materials. So here you see M Bellica guns Biohazard, Everfrost, Polar Strike, and so on. I'm going to select Biohazard. Now it's going to take a while to load this material, so give it a second. Okay, so we've got this M Bellica guns Biohazard material. And here in the world, we can see that it looks quite different. It's got yellow stripes on it. So we can also customize this in other ways as well. For example, we have item name, and we can change this from base weapon to something else. Let's call this, say, Burst SMG. Now, let's go ahead and hit play, and we'll go up to this weapon, hit the E key, and now we can clearly see that we've swapped weapons. We threw down the regular old weapon, and now we're equipping this black and yellow biohazard material weapon. So we know that swap weapon is working properly. Okay, so one last thing I want to point out is when we're finished swapping a weapon, we need to take a look at something important that happens. Now, here I have a weapon, and I'm going to come over to my world outliner and search for shooter character BP, and here in the details panel, I'm going to search for trace hit item. Now, here's our trace hit item and trace hit item last frame. Now, if I go ahead and trace over the weapon, we have our trace hit item changed to base weapon BP, and if I look away, it's set to none. But what happens when I go ahead and swap the item? Well, now our trace hit item is set to base weapon BP and it's not set back to none. That means if I come over here and I'm not looking at anything and I hit E, well, then it tries to swap a weapon again, and that's not what we want. So we're going to have to add another change to swap weapon. So here, after we drop the weapon and we equip the weapon, we need to go ahead and set our trace hit item to null. So null pointer. And we'll go ahead and set trace hit item last frame to null pointer as well. Now, there's an important thing to take note of now that we've added this change. Because we've set trace hit item last frame to null pointer, we're no longer going to be able to hide the widget for the item we hit last frame if we stop tracing it. But if we're swapping the weapon, then the item we hit last frame is the item that we're going to equip. So we can make sure that when we equip an item, we hide its pickup widget. So we can go into item.cpp into our function where we're setting the item properties and come here into the EIS equipped state. Here we can hide the pickup widget, and we can do that by saying pickup widget set visibility to false. So now as soon as we equip a weapon and that weapon enters the equipped state, that pickup widget will be hidden. Let's go ahead and compile this and test it out. Okay, so we're back here in the editor. I'm going to hit play and I'm going to pick up this item. I'm going to swap the weapon. But first I'm going to get our shooter character selected so we can see trace hit item. Now I'm going to swap it and it's now set back to none. Now I'll have to go ahead and unoverlap and re-overlap in order to get that trace hit back, which I'm okay with because if we just dropped a weapon, I would like us to have to go and walk away and then come back to be able to trace and pick it up again. So that is one last tweak that we needed to make. Excellent. So that's going to conclude this video. We have now learned how to swap weapons. In the next video, we're going to learn how to make this weapon swapping a little bit more interesting. We want to be able to walk up to a weapon and instead of just simply swapping it like this, we want to see the new weapon fly up to our face for a second, showing us the weapon we're about to equip just before equipping it. So we will cover that in the next video.